I want to get this meeting started. This is, it is May 9th, 2016. This is a committee of the whole meeting of City Council. And the topic for today is we're going to start a discussion on charter government. It's something that's been talked about around Salem for a number of years. And it really is a community effort. So I'm glad to see representatives here from the Chamber of Commerce and the Sod Center and some bipartisan support. And I hope everybody at home that has questions, can start directing them to us, and we can really open up this discussion on what it is to be a charter government and what it takes to get a charter government going, if that's what the citizens of Salem want. So joining us today to kick off the discussion, we have some guests from other cities around Ohio that have charter systems in place. And joining us today is Ken Filipiak. Ken is with Mentor, Ohio as the city manager. The assistant city manager from Mentor, Tony Zampedro, is here also. And Tony, I think you have also some history with, is it Ashtabula?
City of Parma and the city of Conneaut.
Oh, Conneaut, right. Thank you. And you were a law director, right? Yes. Council president? Former council president, yeah, Councilman Ray Kirchner, and Doug Lewis, the assistant city manager of Paynesville also. So welcome to Salem. We're glad to have you here. I'm going to turn it over to Ken Filipiak. Ken was hired in Mentor as city manager in 2009. He served as a city manager in Ohio continuously for the past 21 years, and prior to that in county government and nonprofit management. He received his undergraduate degree in government from Georgetown University and a master's in public administration from Bowling Green State University. He's an ICMA credentialed manager. ICMA is International City Management Association, is that right?
Yes.
And currently serves as the president of the Lake County Mayors and Managers Association. He serves on multiple boards, including the Ohio City Managers Association and the Ohio Association of Public Safety Directors. He's married to Beverly and has 2 children, Sophia and Kenneth. And I'm going to let Ken give us a quick presentation on city management, and I'll let you leave an open discussion then.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Eskew. I want to thank all of you.
Feel free to move your seats too if you want to see the screen.
I want to thank all of you for hosting us here this evening. In full disclosure, we began our conversation because I also serve as the committee chairman for one of the Ohio City County Management Association's committees, referred to as the support of the profession. And one of the things that we do is we provide contexts such as this, where some of our managers will get together and provide discussions, engage in discussions, and do occasional presentations to communities who are considering the council manager form of government. As Councilman Nestor pointed out, we are also joined here from some representatives, both who have experience in local government, but have some unique experiences that I thought might add to the discussion. Mr. Zampedro is a former law director and is currently serving as the assistant to city manager in Mentor. He himself has engaged in the process of a charter revision with the city of Parma at one point. They actually chose not to move forward, but he can offer you some insight both on some of the steps to take when you first get started in forming a charter. Doug Lewis is currently the assistant city manager in Paynesville, Ohio, but is also served in several other communities, including as the city manager in Conneaut, Ohio. And Councilman Kirchner, I am privileged to work with on city council for the city of Mentor. He is the former council president and longtime member of city council, I think the most tenured member of our city council. And he's here to offer you some perspective from a legislative point of view on questions you might have on how the interaction between the city manager and the legislative branch of our government works. So I want to make this as interactive as possible. We do have a slideshow presentation to kind of lead our discussion, and we can get into that. But I'm going to offer the opportunity to ask questions as we go. Certainly feel free to interrupt any one of us at any given point in time. And I thought I'd open with a question on, would you like to talk a little bit about the charter process itself, or kind of go right into discussions on the city manager form?
Well, I think part of what we need to understand too is just what's the process to get a charter going? I mean, what kind of work's involved? You know, what has to come
Sure.
together as people, and what are the steps?
I think I'm going to let Mr. Zampedro begin that discussion.
Good evening. Just by way of disclosure again, I was the assistant law director in Parma, Ohio in the early 90s. From there, I went to the city of Conneaut where they were a newly formed charter council manager community. I was appointed there in 95 as their first law director under the charter. From Conneaut, I went back to Parma as their chief assistant law director. And the reason I go back to Parma is Parma, similar to you, they are a statutory city. And in fact, depending on the decade between them and Canton, they're the largest statutory city in the state. So depending on where the population comes and goes. So anecdotally in Parma, typically it seemed that maybe about every 10 years or so, there's a movement to bring a charter into Parma. And the last one that I was involved in was in 2005. And that, again, there's two ways to do that. One is through direct council action with a 2/3 vote under the Constitution of the state of Ohio, or by petition by the citizens, 10% of the citizens asking the question, should a charter commission be formed? So you folks seem to be exploring the front end of that. I would say that the experience I had in Parma is that by Constitution, again, this is going back to 2005, so I don't believe anything's changed. Typically, you will ask two questions on the ballot. One is, should a commission be chosen to formulate a charter for your city? And secondly, you elect the commissioners that are going to serve on that charter commission. It will be 15 individuals. And again, in terms of, at least in regards to Parma, I believe the only public officials who were prohibited from serving on that commission were city council members who by law are required to only hold one public office.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes, sir.
Are those two questions, are they simultaneously on the ballot?
They are simultaneously on the ballot, so
Okay.
that if the majority of the folks that vote decide not to form a charter commission, then the rest of the votes are of no effect. If the answer is affirmative, let's form a charter commission, the majority votes for that, then the top 15 vote getters of all of those running for the commission would be seated in that, on the charter commission.
And I'd like to interrupt if I may, only because I did, and by the way, your website is, that's plural, your website is excellent. And this, you set out the steps to form a charter commission and place it on the charter, and it's, the 17 steps that you set out are absolutely excellent. Talk to me just for a second. I'm confused about the time frame. If one occurs not less than 60 nor more than 120 days after passage of the ordinance, we need then to put a time frame so that it fits in. If we don't want to pay for a special
Yes, sir.
election, which would cost us per precinct, then whatever we decide to do must be in this time frame. So it has to be within the 60 days and not more than 120 when it could be placed on the ballot. And I'm just looking again at time frames to see what we're
Yes,
looking at.
and you're right about that. If you do, and again, I want to be very careful. I know, obviously, the city has a law director and has legal advice, so any specific legal questions I'd ask be referred to your law director. But the timing is very important in that you do, in Parma's case in 2005, they did time that with the general election so that the general election fell within that time period. And I believe that happens when either the petition is certified as sufficient to the Board of Elections or when council, now, and again, I would ask you to check with your own law director, but council can pass legislation and direct when that is forwarded to the Board of Elections for placement. So the timing sort of takes place when
So you
it's,
can actually place that in the ordinance as to when
Absolutely.
you want to submit, have it submitted,
that's,
so that it fits within that relatively narrow time frame that this can be put on if you don't want to have to pay for a special.
my opinion would be yes, that you can do that, but again, I would
Well,
assert that you ask your own legal counsel just to make sure in terms of the timing,
then
because
the next
the election
question-
laws are very, are scrutinized very, to a very great degree, so you want to make sure you have it right, because if you don't, and your Board of Elections has a different opinion, you end up going through that process with them.
And I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I'm looking at either the general election, but in turn, can you also then do it at a primary if the polls are open in a primary?
My understanding is, I believe that there's no difference between whether it's a primary or the fall general election. And then once the charter is commissioned, they have a time frame to get the drafting of the charter completed, and then again, timely submitted back to the Board of Elections to be placed on the ballot for approval or rejection.
Thank you very much.
In terms of, and actually, your mayor had a very good question to me, why a charter? And one of the things I will tell you, the front half of my career's 15 years as a city attorney, I don't know why a community wouldn't opt to have a charter. A charter allows, and that's in regards to whichever form of government you wish to choose. You could have a charter government that mirrors the form of government you have now. Ken may not appreciate my saying that, but the point is, when it comes to home rule in Ohio, and under the Constitution, charter local governments have the greatest latitude in the amount of laws that they can pass that can be at variance with the state code. So if there's something peculiar that you want to do locally, not every case, and I'll give you a good example of not every case, but issues such as economic development, you can cut out some of the sort of the tedious process that a lot of municipalities have to go through in order to transfer property if economic development's a concern for the community. I had another good example that was very recent. It'll come to me. One of the things that you can't, though, and home rule has generally sort of somewhat eroded by the Ohio Supreme Court recently in terms of their definition of it. One good example is residency laws. If you recall, the state legislature changed residency laws for the state, that you could not require non-critical personnel to reside in your community, even if they were employed by you. And that was true even if it was in your charter, which it was with the city of Cleveland. And they challenged it, said, hey, our charter, our folks said, we want people who work for us living in our community. And unfortunately, in that case, because it was the state legislature, when they determined there's a statewide interest in a single path for an issue, that's gonna carry the day for the state. But that's not in all cases. So there are, like I say, in terms of latitude of local self-government, the most latitude you can have is through a charter, either specifically or the charter general reservation of powers. So you'll have a charter that'll say X, Y, and Z. Y might be different than what the state provides, but at the end, it's a good charter is gonna say, and all those other things we haven't expressly stated, we're reserving for local control. So it's sort of an open-ended document that allows the local government to, typically through legislation, go and vary from state law on those issues. Civil service, that was another one I was trying to think of. Your civil service laws can be changed through a charter provision reserving that to local self-government.
So going back to the process, you said there's 15 people that are elected to a charter commission to develop the charter.
Yes.
Is that a set amount? 15 is the number that you have to
My
have?
recollection on that is it's 15 electors,
Okay.
yes.
And anybody in the citizenry can put their name on the ballot to run for that charter commission?
And again, there may be some have to have been a resident for a year. You're asking me to go back 10,
Right.
11 years here. But my recollection is that with, like I said, the one notable exception that I can recall was city council members who by state law are prohibited from holding more than one public office.
Okay, so council people cannot be on the charter commission, is that what you're saying?
That was certainly the case in 2005.
Okay, okay.
And again, I would ask your law director to probably opine, but I will tell you that other city officials did serve on our charter commission. Our auditor and our treasurer did.
Say that again, please?
I said other city officials were eligible to serve on the charter commission. And in
But aren't they elected officials?
They are, but they're not prohibited under the same prohibition that city council has in Title VII against holding dual office. But again, I want to just be very clear. Please ask your own legal advisor for more clarity. But in Parma in 2005, I believe both the auditor and the treasurer served on the charter commission. We're elected to it as well, obviously.
So after, assuming that this is put on the ballot and it goes forward and a charter commission is formed, what happens then?
The charter commission is impaneled, they're sworn in. And again, depending on your makeup, it's like any new body, they're going to adopt a set of rules and regulations to manage their meetings. In Parma's case, they elected a president and a vice president. So similar to a legislative model in that respect. And then they opted to hire a facilitator from Cleveland State to assist with some of the topics of discussion. In that case, the city law department, myself, I was tapped to be the legal advisor to the commission to sort of help them through some various legal issues only. Now, your law director may do that. Your law director may decide it may be better to have an independent counsel come in and do that. Again, it's up to the body at that point in time. So they will.
Who paid for all this? Who
The
pays?
city's required to pay for the needs of the commission.
So it becomes a budget item?
It can. Usually it's not very expensive. The highest expense you'll see is if you decide to bring in a facilitator. What's the facilitator's cost? In our case, that was one of the things that the city council and the city was concerned about. That's why the law director's office offered to provide the legal assistance at no additional cost. So we were, and again, I apologize, I don't know what Salem's situation with their law director is. We had an in-house law department in Parma, so we were already being paid to be there. Yes, sir.
Excuse me. I have to assume that this commission has some kind of a manual or a guideline that they can achieve or get from somebody to give them
There's a lot of information out there. I know the Ohio City Manager's website has some, but there's other sources as well. If you speak to Kent State has a very good public management studies. So they're another good contact. They're close. Youngstown State may have one as well. Akron does, Cleveland State. So there's a lot of other ways to get that information. I would suggest too, a lot of cities have, you can find online at the Ohio City Managers Association, all of the cities in Ohio that have city council manager forms of government, so you can find a listing of those folks. So it's really just going out and finding what does the body want to do.
So there are sources of information.
Absolutely. This has been done hundreds of times throughout the state.
So we've got, everyone's seated, they're on the commission, they're working towards getting a charter. What's the timeline? What happens next?
I believe you have a year to get that submitted to the voters. So you wanna sort of structure an agenda. In Parma's case, they met at least monthly, sometimes more, depending on what the issues were and where they had to get. Obviously, the big discussion is over the form of government, because there are a number in Ohio, as you folks know. So that's usually the biggest discussion. But then there are a lot of other details that you can get into in terms of are there certain things that are important to this community that you want to put in the charter.
For example?
I've seen Hudson, for example, they did away with civil service. They had problems with civil service. They have a personnel advisory board. It's quite a bit different than your typical civil service process. It's I think a little designed to be a little more efficient, a little more streamlined. I can speak on Mentor's behalf. Mentor Civil Service, for one instance, we have classified civil service for fire and police uniformed officers only. So your dispatchers, your jailers, and the entire rest of the public works division and the rest of the employees are not civil service employees under the Mentor Charter. So that's just one example, but pretty much with certain limitations, anything that's of import to the community, of import to the commission, you can get it accomplished in the charter and have it set up.
So what's the period of time then that the charter's got to be out there for public review and prior to voting?
Yeah, my memory is gonna fail me on that. I know that we had the year, and I think we were done. You have to get things to the Board of Elections typically.
I'm gonna quote your own website if I may.
45, 60 days, I'm trying to remember now.
Yeah, print the proposed charter, distribute a copy of the proposed charter to each elector whose names appear on the polls held in the municipality not less than 30 days prior to the election.
Normally, you wanna get it to the Board of Elections timely though too, and you need to check with them. A lot of times, a lot of issues you need to have done 75 days was the number I was looking for.
Does the whole charter go on the ballot?
The charter is published and is put in, it'll be here at City Hall, it'll be available for inspection. Quite frankly, in today's day, the entire charter is not on the
Okay.
ballot, no. The
Okay.
issue will be, should the citizens adopt the charter that was crafted by the Salem Charter Commission, yes or no?
Okay.
The charter itself might be at the ballot, the polling places for inspection too, but it won't actually appear on the ballot.
And what happens if it's voted in? Is there a transition period or?
There is, in most charters, most good charters are gonna provide in there how you're gonna do that transition.
Mhm.
When the public offices that are existing, how they're going to transcend out. Some of them may just merge into the positions if there are comparable positions in the charter.
Mhm.
Okay, yeah. I think that covers the generality. Again, I would strongly urge you to talk to your legal advisor. I absolutely will leave my contact information if I can be of assistance to you folks or your law director. I'm more than happy to lend whatever assistance I can. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I think as Tony pointed out, there are a number of things, there's really the full range of governmental operations is open to you when you're reviewing the charter. Some of the things that inevitably come up, and some of this goes back to what form of government you choose, but typically you'll get into a lot of discussion in these charter committees on how appointments are made. Again, if you go with a council manager form of government, that's pretty straight line. If you end up with a council mayor form of government, that could be a little bit different. There are many, many variants on that. You could look at a council mayor form of government that may have a professional administrator. Usually the authority of those individuals is very clearly spelled out in the charter. They may or may not have some appointing authority. They may have appointing authority that has to be confirmed by council. They may be required to make a recommendation to the mayor, who then goes back to council. All kinds of variants on that. So it really kind of starts with your focus on that form of government first. A couple other things that your charter commissions will take a look at will be other personnel issues. Mr. Zampedro mentioned civil service. That's always an important one. If you keep a civil service commission, rules that are followed there tend to be important going forward. Sometimes it's just practical considerations. Local government wants to have a little bit more flexibility and opportunity to appoint from a longer list of candidates for a particular job. So instead of a rule of 3, they might go to a rule of 10, for example. You would have there are rules of procedure in conducting your meetings. I worked for one community that did not have executive sessions. How you conduct those executive sessions, how you would move into them, what rules of order. It's fairly typical for, see some reference in a lot of charters that say that the council shall be mandated to create a rules of order shortly after taking office. Others will just simply say they'll follow Robert's Rules of Order. So, as Mr. San Pedro said, there's a very, very broad range of authority and issues that you can look at during that process. My advice on that would be to do your homework and to grab some of those communities that you think are particularly well-run. See what their charters look like. There are a number of locations out there, both websites and organizations. The Ohio Municipal League will offer a model charter example. That's a very good source. They also, I don't know if Salem if you're members of the Ohio Municipal League. If you are, then usually you can have some assistance by their staffers to at least point you in the right direction. We found as well that universities, especially those that have public administration programs, whether that's, or just strong government public policy programs, will typically have, sometimes their faculty staff members serve as very good moderators for this, and they may do it at very little cost or no cost, depending on what type of connection they have to the community or to the region. So there are a lot of good resources out there. I've seen this work in the past where a community was changing from a mayor-council form of government to a council manager, and they utilized a professional faculty member from one of the local universities to help them write those changes into their charter. So really kind of the sky's the limit on that when you're looking at adopting under a charter under the Home Rule Authority. So you want to have those. And while council members can't participate directly, they can certainly, I've always seen, either as a council as a whole or as individuals, forward topics that they would like that charter commission to consider. So keep that in mind as well, because they're going to be looking, a lot of times they'll look to the local elected leadership to help them understand what topics you would like them to look at, because you know what issues are working in your community and what things you may like to see done a little bit differently or a little bit more efficiently, perhaps. So those are all good opportunities for that. So given that, again, that threshold question tends to be what is the type of government that you are looking to adopt. And this is where we sort of lead into our presentation topic here in our discussion. And as I said earlier, please feel free to interrupt, ask any questions as we go forward. But there are essentially two, let me try to forward this. So what is the council management form of government? This is just some history, but it essentially, the form of government is over 100 years old, and it has its roots in the idea of trying to bring more, what I would like to refer to more as a business type of environment to local government. It goes back to the fundamental differences, the appointment of the chief executive officer and the authority that's vested in that. Why the change and what is the history? The history really goes back to a time where too many communities found themselves being less effective than they could have otherwise be, or because they saw a level of inequity, either in terms of how jobs were distributed after elections, how politics played into the appointment of individuals, how that impacted city operations, municipal operations going forward. So it really has its root in the idea of trying to provide that efficient and effective manner of operating government, less so about structures. And I would be the first one to stand here and tell you that, you know, I have worked in both systems. Been a public manager in Ohio for over 20 years, and I've had the privilege of working with some very good mayors. The differences, though, we're going to get into a little bit. it gives you a little bit of Ohio history there of some of the first, Dayton was the first Ohio city. And in fact, the city of Westerville just recently celebrated its 100th anniversary as, with the city manager government. I'll show us, I have a sheet at the very end of this presentation that shows that in the United States, the majority of cities between populations 25,000 and up to about 250,000 tend to be council manager forms of government. So while it isn't as prevalent in the northern part of the state, as you get further south, and just speaking about Ohio in particular, it's a very, very popular form of government overall in the United States. In Ohio, you tend to see a little bit more of a split north and south. So we're up in Mentor and Painesville are two communities that have adopted the council manager form of government. Chardon, Ohio, the other city manager that was going to join us here today. We tend to be a little bit in the minority in the northern part of the state, to the south around Dayton and Cincinnati and Columbus. Mostly city manager form of government down there. Some of the key elements, and again, we touched on this, but you're hiring a manager based on professional qualifications and experience. And there's a lot to be said about that. Because what persons like myself and the gentleman behind me, we are trained, we'll go to school, I have a master's in public administration, and we've dedicated our careers to public service management. And so that professional qualifications is a benefit to any community, because on day one, there's no learning curve. Obviously, everyone needs to get to know a community, and every community operates a little bit differently. But running the government and trying to run it efficiently, you're bringing together a skill set with you. And I would suggest to you that there's a lot more than just that knowledge base at play. When you're hiring managers from across who have experience, you're not only hiring their knowledge, but you're hiring their experience, not just experience in embracing the different types of problems and issues that they'll confront, but you're hiring someone with agency contacts at the various levels of government. You're hiring people who probably have state contacts, and whether that's at the county level or state level, very likely at the national level through in the federal government. You're hiring people who have experience developing staff and developing professional management at the grassroots level. Go ahead.
Yeah, can I comment too? I mean, can you comment on, I've read in a couple of charters where they actually spell out when you're hiring the manager what qualifications the manager has. Can you also say, or equivalent experience, or how free are you to describe in the charter the qualifications of the manager?
Well, you can be as explicit as you want. I think you will find probably among the most popular provisions that speak to professional manager is that degree requirement. I've seen some communities that specifically, I don't know how typical it is to place it in the charter itself, because usually there is some level of experience. You'll see more generic language in the charter, that combination of professional experience and training. I think typically though, today you will see the majority of managers and communities of any size, certainly Salem size, would expect to be able to hire a manager that would have a degree in public administration. It's fairly typical to have a degree in, at least a master's degree in public administration and some combination of experience. The organization that, for our professional organization on a national and actually an international level, is ICMA, which is the International City County Management Association. They actually have a credentialing program now as well, which is given out to experienced managers who have made an ongoing commitment for ongoing professional education. So you're required to do at least 40 hours annually, much like a credentialing program, CLE credits, on ongoing education credits for teachers or lawyers or other engineers, other professions. So it is, I would probably tell you to hesitate to put too many specifics actually in the charter, but most charters, if you end up adopting a council management form of government, your city council is going to be the driver behind that hiring process exclusively. So what you look for will be based on what you're after. So, I mean, one would expect, again, a community of your size can expect to attract some pretty well-qualified candidates. I would certainly expect you would be able to get someone minimum with a degree requirement and some significant experience. This might be a good chance for Councilman Kirschner to jump in. Ray, what were you guys looking for? Have you gone through this process a couple of times?
Good evening. Thank you for the invitation this evening. Ken's right. We went through a process where they have their newsletter, the city manager newsletter. There's national newsletters. We had people that applied for the city manager's job as far away as New Mexico, and it was maybe 20 or 25 applicants. We had a council committee that reviewed the number that came in, and we whittled it down to say maybe 10, and then we brought them all in separately for an interview. And I can assure you that when you do go through that process, you're going to get some very qualified people. And again, you can go through a couple rounds and maybe not come up with a decision, because what we did have an applicant that came forward, and because we had what we call a supermajority to hire in our charter, he came up short. So when we went through another round, and we came up with the second round, and that's when we hired Ken. So it's certainly council's job to do that, and it's a rewarding job, and you'll find that you will get very qualified people. And I don't think you don't really want to have to worry about, as Ken mentioned, putting something into the charter about education, because you will get many qualified people. I know I've done this 27 years. I've been a public servant, and I'm on my 16th, 15th, and 16th year on council. And I can assure you that the city manager form of government has served us well. What it does, I think you'll hear a lot of, is it takes the politics out of the city. You know, a lot of that might be with a mayor, say how hiring goes. When we hire a city manager, we hire him. That's it. You know, he hires everyone else. He hires all his administrators, everybody else, the parks, finance, all those people are hired by the city manager. The only people we hire under our charter is aside from him, is the law director and our clerk of council. And after that, everything is directed, all questions, issues that we have as a city council, we take to the city manager. And Ken's very flexible, most city managers are very flexible, so if we have a question for the parks director, something, we email him with the question. We always make sure we copy the city manager to keep him in the loop. But by charter, everything starts at the administration level with the city manager. So he has his staff meetings every week. They go over what the agenda might be for the council meeting, which is set by council. So, and in our case, with the city council, we have 7 councilmen. 4 of them are ward councilmen, 3 of us are at large, and then amongst ourselves, we choose our leadership, president and vice president.
Can I ask a question on that real quickly? Now, do you have 7 council people because your charter defined what your council number will be? Or
Yes.
are you set by, so we could have less than 7 council people, we could have 5 council people if we wanted.
Yeah, and I think it's determined too by your city. We're 25 square miles, and I think in 1964 when we became charter, while we had a lot less people living there at the time, but I think they saw that dividing the city in a quadrant, so to speak, worked out better, and then you have the 3 at-large people. And again, it works out very well for us.
Do you balance, did you set limits or a parameter, for example, on salaries before you interviewed, or was that a negotiable item after the interviews?
We set a salary, and we do like a yearly review where what we did, we went out and we took a look at comparable cities throughout the state of Ohio. City managers, what they were paid, what else was offered for instance, like for a car, or other expenses, an IRA, for those types of things. So we based the salary after initially hiring them and reviewing them after, say, a year on what other city managers make. And of course, if your city managers, if you really want to keep them too, you make sure that you pay him well enough that he stays with you. So,
I saw some figures in the website that you actually have censuses of what other city managers make. So it's across the board, that's information that's available. You
Yes.
can compare
mhm.
population-wise.
Yeah, and it's, like I said, it's very easy to get, and it's the same with other personnel too. When you hire, say if you hire a clerk of council, there's information on what clerks make throughout the state as well.
Thank you.
So,
Yeah, I'd like to point out too, for anybody at home that might be listening, now or recorded, but to me, it always impressed me that our budget's about the size of the school system, and this is the way the school system operates. You elect the school board goes and finds somebody who's credentialed and experienced, and they become the superintendent. So, this isn't really, this shouldn't be something that's kind of scary. This is something that we're really very familiar with in the way the school system operates.
That's a good point. I personally don't think you can go wrong, really. There's plenty of qualified mayors that run cities throughout the state, I'm sure, or country for that matter. But in our case, I think we feel very secure that we have a professional administrator out there doing the work for the city. And, they bring a lot of, besides being an administrator, they bring a lot of what they've been taught or what they do when they go on seminars, a lot of the creativity, some of the hires that people that they hire, learning how, having that knowledge on what to look for when you hire somebody as a city manager. In our case, when Ken came on board, he went through maybe 3 or 4 new hires, and I could tell you they were exceptional hires. And some of the explanations I got from him as far as what he looked for and why he hired these people really was telling when it comes to why we have a city manager. And again, with the creativity side, we hired, Ken came to us, and city mentor is high ranking in the state as far as manufacturing and retail, and he came up with the idea of hiring an international trade expert. So we now have a full-time trade administrator. And again, it was just something that helps our businesses and something that helps them down the road if they want to talk about trade overseas. She's able to show them how to do it. So those are some of the things I think the city manager brings to a community.
What's the interaction that the city management function has with council in your city? Is it an annual business plan that has to be put together or planned and presented, or?
Well, I think that all ties into the budget. Council sets the budget. We set where we want to go in the future, what we want to propose. For instance, we might want to do something in the Parks Department, put up something in the parks. We put that on the budget, and they do their best job of coming forward with a design. Like this year, we're doing an amphitheater, brand new amphitheater. I mean, state-of-the-art amphitheater. He has the administrators, the expertise on his staff to go out and find the best cost and the best type of amphitheater that suits our needs. So, but council says that's what we want, and so we direct the city manager in that respect. And he follows, and he comes. It's same with legislation. Every meeting you'll have legislation out there that comes before the council president sets the agenda. Whatever the manager brings forward, the council president reviews it, and if it's satisfied that should go forward, then it gets on the agenda. But we do have, we have our political interaction as well. I mean, it's not like he doesn't get calls, what's going on here? How come this happened? Because he hears about it for sure.
Mhm.
So just like you may call the mayor and say, Mayor, we've got an issue over here, same thing with us, we call the manager up and we got an issue, and he takes care of it. on the questions?
Thank you.
So, I like this better. We're getting a little bit off of a script, but it really, I think Councilman Kirchner did a great job of starting to give you a little better understanding of the dynamic, and I think maybe that's a good place to really just start to talk about the council manager form of government. So, the day-to-day operations are what the manager takes care of, and I referred earlier to, it's more like a corporate structure, because just as Councilman Nestic pointed out, you're hiring somebody who has experience and qualifications to run a large operation. And you're bringing that expertise, that business sense to the operation. So my job is to follow the direction, and this gets into that dynamic. So I take, you mentioned a business plan, and a lot of what we do is coordinated through our budget process. But the nicest thing probably about the council management form of government is the freedom it gives city council to really focus its time on the policymaking end. So it can spend less time worrying about whether or not, the dog is barking over on 16th Street, and more time focusing on the larger community issues, community planning, business planning, zoning issues, all of those things that sometimes don't get enough time because you get caught up in some of the operational issues of government. It's my job to carry out the community plans and the business plans of our city council. They're a board of directors. It's very much that corporate board structure. So on a day-to-day basis, the city manager's office hires, promotes, fires as necessary people, manages the city's overall operating budget. But it's very, very much an interactive process. I would tell you that there is not a single week that passes when I won't speak directly to all 7 members of my council, and it really needs to be that way. In our community, we have 4 wards. Those ward needs are a little bit different. We have the direction, but we're also taking taking direction and interacting with the different wards on different ward issues, because they're not all the same. We have a very interesting community because we have a very large presence of retail establishments, a very large manufacturing base, as well as a section of our community along Lake Erie, along the coastline of Lake Erie where we sit, where there are a lot of those recreation issues, a lot of issues created by visitation and things like that. So these all have unique aspects to them that have to be managed a little bit differently. Prepares plans and reports for council. So as is in the city management form of government, the city manager is also in charge of presenting council with what I'll call policy options. So if you're considering what to do, for example, with a downtown, you want revitalization in a downtown area, but you don't know how to get started on that process. You're probably going to work together with your Chamber of Commerce, the business owners in that particular area. It would be the administration's job, and when I stand here, I will refer interchangeably with administration and city manager, because we tend to work as a team unit, the directors and along with the members of my office. And it would be my job to present information to you on ways for you to go forward, offer you options so that you can lead to a more beneficial discussion on that, and ultimately make a decision to provide direction back to the city manager where it gets implemented. There have been, let me see if I can advance this. That's what we're just referring to, making recommendations to council on policy. Enforcement issues. The nicest thing about, I think, one of the nicest things about the council manager form of government, and this is sometimes offered as a knock against it by those who are advocates of the mayor-council form, is accountability, and the suggestion that, well, if we don't have an elected mayor, who do I call to make sure that my needs in the neighborhood or wherever my needs might be are going to get resolved? And the answer to that is I would suggest to you that the council manager form of government is actually more responsive, because you're vesting that authority to achieve that outcome that the council is after in a single individual that you control. So if you, it's my job to hire a staff and the best possible professional staff that I can to meet the community needs. If they're not being met, I'm going to hear about it from Mr. Kirchner or any one of the other 7 members of council, or council as a whole. And as he pointed out, I'll have at least an annual review, but the reality is it's a 365-day review. If I'm not getting that job done, I'm going to hear it, and they have the ultimate option, which is to remove me and find somebody who will meet their needs a little bit more aggressively or fully. So that's very, well, accountability is at a particularly high in this form. When we talk about application, so operations of the city is a very generic term, but I think one of the biggest differences is that we get to apply the policies of our local government and the way that we conduct government business in an even-handed way under this system of government. Politics do not take part in the decisions that we make on a day-to-day basis. So if you're doing business in the community, you'd like to know that you have the comfort in knowing that the decisions of that government are not going to be based on the individual desires of any particular group, on the party that's in office at that particular time. If you work for the city and you're a high qualified individual, but you maybe you're a member of the wrong party, but you're doing a good job, the people in that community have the confidence of knowing that that professional staff will remain in place regardless of who is or isn't out of office. Now, they're still ultimately responsible for their performance. So if the police chief isn't doing their job, it's my job to get them motivated to do so. If they can't, then it's my job to bring somebody else in that can do that job. And I'll be held accountable by city council to make sure that that happens.
You're not restricted, or are you, by geographics for your chief and fire?
No, we are not. We are not, but again, that's something that becomes another charter issue. Some communities will require that their most senior leadership in their police and fire departments in particular come from within the department. I can tell you that I would probably advise you against that, because while we certainly always look for opportunities to reward high-performing people and promote within if you can, sometimes you don't have those individuals, so it gives you that opportunity.
It gives you the opportunity.
Gives you the
to
opportunity.
go wherever you need to go to find
the best
the
people.
individual that you want for that position.
Correct. Again, because these individuals are being chosen on the basis of merit, and their ongoing employment is not, and this works the other way too, so their ongoing employment is based on their performance, not based on who they might know or how well connected they might be at City Hall or elsewhere. It serves the community. That community comes first, and my board, our city council, ensures that community is served even-handedly and without bias. This, I think, when we were preparing for this, continuity, I think, is probably one of the most significant distinctions, and one of the things that I would ask you to give the most consideration to when you're considering the city manager form of council manager form of government. Continuity matters, and again, if you, I'll use an example. I use that example about downtown development, for example, or redevelopment. These are projects, especially if you're dealing with brownfields or you're trying to set up a community development zone or an empowerment zone. You're talking about projects and plans that can take many, many years to implement. And it's important to have that longevity or the opportunity for that longevity in your governmental operations because, again, council will make plans, and sometimes those councilmen or council women will change out. Those councils will change, but the community goals remain the same. Same is true of mayor's administrations. They can change, but if you have community goals that need to endure for longer periods of time, it gives you an opportunity to see those plans implemented. Equally important is that continuity of staff that I mentioned earlier. I will tell you that I've been able to attract a lot of very, very high qualified and high performing individuals from other communities who were attracted to our community in part because of the many things, the many positive things that we have to offer, but in large part because the system of government ensures that their performance will be rewarded and that, again, they feel comfortable working within a system where they can be based on where their performance and their ongoing employment is based on how well they do, how well they serve the community, and not who happens to be in office at that particular time. It also allows, this system also allows, and I think this is an important point as well, it also allows, city managers tend to have much longer range thinking. So I'm not thinking in terms of what might be accomplished in just this next budget cycle or this next legislative or mayoral term. We're thinking long-term. So I like to tell my staff, let's make short-term decisions thinking about the long-term. So when we talk about whether it's staff development or attracting certain businesses to the community or creating an environment in which businesses can thrive within the community, this takes ongoing, persistent action and planning and being able to apply those things so that whether it's the business community, the residential, those persons who come and live and work in our community, they know what to expect out of their local government without being subject to a change in rules and a change in thinking in terms of project development or redevelopment or development within your community. Because while planning can change, again, the long-range thinking about how your government operates and who has access to that government remains the same. I'm going to pause for just a second. I want to give my colleague, Mr. Lewis, an opportunity to make some comments, if he wants to.
I mean, as far as the ongoing plans, I mean, having been a city manager, I think 20 years out. That's one of the things that we do, and try and keep our staff focused on that too. What do we want the community to become? So we're looking at from a long range. I can tell you in Painesville how I want Painesville to develop. I mean, how I see it developing right now. And it's for one of the things that we're always looking at, it's for the good of the community. How can we get our staff to buy in, to that vision, and also work very closely with council? I mean, I think you talked about it in your question that you asked, how closely do you work with council? As the city manager of Connie, I worked with council every day. I met with our council president, and our council president in that situation felt it was his job to go out and talk with council about the plans and some of the things and how we were moving forward. In other communities, it's the city manager dealing with each individual council member. So it really, you decide how you want it to work, how you want to communicate with your manager at the time. And I think everything, we look at trying to move the forward community in the most efficient way. We use our department heads to accomplish a lot of that, and I think it's very important. I'm always looking to hire the most qualified department head that's gonna make me look good. If they're smarter than me, that's even better, because they're coming up with ideas on how to move the community forward They're coming up with ideas on how to get additional grants, how we may approach a certain project. Those are important things nowadays, especially with funding. And so I think, I mean, I kind of got thrown up here, but to answer your question, I mean, it's very important to, and I think that's one of the most important things, is to continue the plans on. One of the things that we've done in Painesville, and I'll talk very briefly, is we've put together a lot of plans while I've been in Painesville. And I was recruited to Painesville as the Assistant City Manager and Community Development Director to get some of these projects done. And we looked at a downtown Painesville, downtown streetscape plan, put that in place. That's gonna be something that's gonna continue with whoever is the city manager there. And we have had a change, since the last manager left, and we've put that plan in place. And it's continuing because council's on board with it, they've bought in with it, the downtown businesses have bought in with it. So it's things like that that we look at putting in place, your comprehensive plans, just a variety of different things. As far as looking at the future and how you want the community to look in the future. And that's something that doesn't last from election to election. That's something that's long-term.
Excuse me, how long has Painesville had a charter?
I'm trying to think, we're back to the 70s, I believe, that
Okay.
we've actually had a charter form of government.
I'm very familiar with Painesville, and I've seen a lot of changes since the 80s.
Yes.
And I wondered if that coincided with, the change in government, because there was a period around the 70s where it wasn't so nice, but then it's come up to be very different city over the past, 20, 30 years.
Yeah, and we've had a city manager for, Les Nero was there for, 20, 25 years. So we've had a lot of consistency in our city manager. Rita McMahon, who recruited me, was there for about 18 years. And I've been there as the assistant city manager for about 8 now.
Thank you. Cindy?
How does it work with the unions, the labor unions, when you have a change to a charter government?
I don't think you really see, well, you do. We're working in the best interest of the community. Sometimes with the labor unions, they become very political. And they can be very political whether you're a city manager or whether you're a mayor. But one of the things that they'll tell you is they elect you. As a city manager, they don't elect us. You appoint us. So we're responsible to you and responsible to the residents of the community. So it gives us the ability to negotiate with them without having to worry about getting elected or needing their vote to get elected. So I think that's one of the major things that you see. Council, usually what we did was we would always set direction going into negotiations. So we would sit down with our city council in executive session and discuss with them, what are your goals in negotiating with the unions? Are we looking at 2%? Are we looking at 3%? And we would explain to them, we would already have the knowledge kind of where we felt that we could end up as far as negotiations are concerned based upon the budget. So one of the things that we did is sit down with our finance director very closely, do the projections in future years and look what was reasonable. But I think the major difference is we're working with council based upon what you have told us to negotiate those union contracts. And we don't have to worry about being elected by the unions, basically.
Again, this goes a little bit to the continuity issue that I mentioned, because a big part of that is relationship building. So if you, as city in the CM form of government, you have the opportunity to build relationships, whether it's with unions, with the business community, and you utilize those over time, and you build on those over time. So again, there might be a chip going back to your question on union negotiations. they know, the union knows that they're going to be dealing with me, whoever is on the elected city council. I have seen this in a lot of communities in the past. A new administration is a new opportunity for another bite at the apple, or a different way to approach those collective bargaining agreements. So that continuity and that relationship building that goes on over time is to the advantage of the community in the end, because again, they'll be dealing with the same staff in terms of negotiating those agreements in that example. That relationship building extends on as well to, as I said, the business community. Again, administrations can change out, council members can change out. A CEO in one of the many corporations within our community knows they can call me up on any given day and talk about an issue that's important to them with respect to their local government. And that's a big deal, because continuity matters for them. They want to know that they're working, creating jobs, and making investments, and they're in a community that has a consistent approach, and that they know the playing field, and they understand it. And they have very likely, and this is true in the example of our city, they have come to know and gotten to know over the years some of the professionals, whether it's economic development or community development or engineering or building services, some of those people that they're working with. And they're not, again, they're not changing out year to year. And they can generally come to rely on professionals in those positions.
Mr. Whitehill.
Significant change in a community can cause what I describe as an issue-driven council loading, whereas one thing sets them off, and you will load an entire council with a supermajority over one issue at times, and we've seen it happen in this community before. What happens then is that you have members who had that one issue, they take action on it, and then they really have nothing else after that, and it can cause disruption at the minimum, chaos at the worst. Are there situations that you've had where city managers have been removed because of one topic like that, and you did not get that continuity simply because the council got loaded, they decided that they had a marked person, and that person's gone, and then that, so I agree with the concept of the continuity, but I'm asking, are there examples where that has not worked, where someone has been exited?
I would probably say that that's very, very rare. And again, and this is an important point with respect to your charter. In our city, it takes 5 of the 7 members to remove me. So there has to be, it would be very, I would think it would be very difficult to find 5 members of a 7-member council, for example, to coalesce around a single issue, unless it's monumental. I mean, they're questions of ethics or unethical behavior and things like that. It might be very easy to find a majority of council to coalesce around an issue like that. But on implementation of a particular policy matter, that would be fairly unusual. And here's the thing I think is very important, and it's fundamental to remember. I work for city council, so I may not necessarily, if I don't have a political party affiliation, you will find that most of my colleagues don't as well. It's generally frowned upon. Members of the Ohio and the Ohio City Managers Association and ICMA, and I would think you would find most professionals in our business follow a very strict code of ethics, and that includes non-political behavior. So you won't find me at any one of your fundraising events or anyone else's for that matter. I won't participate in, I won't vote in I'll vote in primary elections, but on an issues-only ballot. We answer to council. So if the council offers a direction on a policy, I may not think it's the best way to go. My job is to offer you my opinion or a range of options for you, and once that decision's made, my job is to implement it, and I will do that, even if I think it may not be the best course of action. So I think more fully answer your question, in my experience, what I have seen in my profession is that where that goes awry is where managers don't always follow that direction. And, you know, I will tell you that whether you're an electrician or a city manager or a police officer or a grocery clerk, there are good ones and bad ones. But most of them that I've had contact with and are very, very good, very committed to the profession, and understand very clearly where the legislative and the policy matters stop and where implementation of that policy takes off. So I'm here to help make those decisions, but it's ultimately council's to make.
Mr. Brown?
Excuse me, I have a speak problem tonight, but during 2006 and 2007, I was sit down and talk with several city managers in the county and a couple in other counties because I was curious about a charter government. And I went to visit one, and he was very nice, took all the time I wanted. He said, "You got 15 minutes." I said, "Fine, I know you're busy." Yeah, he said, "I don't count ribbons." So I laughed at that, of course. And I said, "By the way," I said, "who handles your grants?" He said, "That's part of my job." He opened up a file drawer. He had 2007, 8, 9, 10, 11, where he'd been working on grants for 5 years in the future. And he said, "This is part of my job." My question is this: can the people that do the charter put in there what responsibilities we want to put on this individual?
Absolutely.
Now,
Yeah,
if
you're,
we can specify your responsibilities.
I don't know if you're gonna drill down to that grant writing level, but you could if you chose to do that. What your charter will very clearly spell out is what the city manager is responsible for, what the city council is responsible for. It probably won't get down to specific activities and who does them. But you know, what generally the language will read something to the effect that all the administrative authority is vested in the city manager, who is responsible for managing these departments. And the council spells out very clearly something else that's generally done by charter. What departments are going to exist. There's usually some language in there that allows you to change that through legislation and what that process is. But generally speaking, you know, this is the other side of the coin. So a city councilman has an idea on someone who they think doesn't do the job very well in the city, or who they think is better suited to do a particular task. Maybe it's grant writing, maybe it's something else. And they say, "I want that person changed, I want this person doing it." That would cross the line. So that would be a strictly administrative. Now, we'll have that conversation. We have those conversations, not in the same manner, but if a question about an employee's service or their conduct comes up, I'm happy to have those discussions with a council member, but generally speaking, those are the type of, but those decisions are administrative in nature, and council has to step away from those. And that is not an issue in our community. That can sometimes lead to some of those divisive issues. You know, you have an individual that certain council members or legislators might coalesce around, and they just don't like them, but the city manager feels differently. Again, he's looking at their professional conduct and not who he is or what their politics might be, or whatever it might be that is upsetting to that particular group. But sometimes that's the job, and sometimes you know, you have to stand behind those principles. And if it isn't, if it causes some problems for that city manager, that's what he's there for. He's got to be a big boy and understand that that's the job.
Yeah, I only have one other question. I was having a cup of coffee with a very good friend of mine this morning. He said, "Clyde," he said, "you've talked about charter government many, many times since I've been on council and so forth. But," he said, "is a city manager form of government more expensive to operate than a municipal city government?"
Well, my answer to that would be no, and I'll tell you why.
I believe you.
You will, any good manager is going to save your city money. If you ask me to summarize my job in the shortest way possible, it would be to be a decision maker. So I make decisions on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, monthly, and long-term, as we talked about earlier. Those decisions collectively, and there's 50 in a day, but each one of those has a consequence. Each one of those has an opportunity to save money for the city, whether that's through contracting services or finding a better way to do it. Going on to the continuity and longevity issue again, one of my jobs is to continually refresh, and Mr. Lewis said this very well. We're always looking for good talent. We're not only looking for good talent, we're always looking for better ways to do city business, whether that's through technology or through a different process or engaging third-party resources or just finding a different way to do business or a new way to do business. It's a very creative form of government because, again, we are in a profession that we are committed to. It's a constant learning process. You know, the day I stop learning is the day I should stop this job. So we're constantly trying to bring those better ideas into the government and refresh it. You know, you're talking about our city, for example, has a multi-million-dollar technical budget, you know, just to operate our information technology systems that we apply, and they save money. Give you an example, we were doing our insurance this year, and for the first time in our history, we went self-insurance for our health of our employees. And it'll probably save our city between $500,000 and $600,000 a year. It took quite a bit of staff time and analysis internally, and a long-term, we did our long-term cost-benefit projections and that to get to that point. I'm very confident that that money will be saved every single year. So is it, you're going to spend a little bit more money than you're probably paying right now to the position of mayor, but it's a profession, and you have to think about it that way. So yes, there's an upfront investment for just like there's an upfront investment for hiring any of your well-qualified persons directing your departments or working as your police and firemen. But it's worth it, because if that person does his or her job, then they're going to be saving you money and making decisions that and perhaps enhance revenue over time. When I started when I interviewed with the city of Mentor, when asked some of my priorities, I think that I made it very clear that our first priority was always maintaining economic development and maintaining a strong, functioning local economy, because it drives everything else that we do. You know, again, it takes a lot of knowledge and experience and creativity sometimes to be able to try to bring new businesses. We all know how difficult it can be in certain times in our national economy. It's harder than other times, but so it's a money saver, and I think ultimately it can be a money generator if you get some people at work that can really take your community in a direction and operate just like any good CEO in the private sector. They're gonna earn their money.
It's a good selling point to the people.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If someone had a mayor with an extensive past administrative background and they fulfilled their maximum terms as a mayor, could they, in a particular instance, be hired as a city manager?
Well,
I mean, just legally.
The easy answer to that is that they could. Again, when you think about our profession, generally takes the politics out of it. So I've seen a lot of communities that I've seen a lot of candidates, let me say, who have come from elected office. Not always they don't always get the highest consideration simply because they have a political affiliation, and I think there's a reluctance by that council to want to introduce politics into what should be an apolitical position. So, not that it couldn't happen, I know people that have transitioned into administrative positions from elected office. It doesn't happen very often.
Thank you.
I do want to make a point, and I probably should have made this a lot earlier, but, you know, this whole process isn't, we have a great mayor who's done a fantastic job. And this is not, you know, this isn't because we're looking to replace our mayor, it's looking to the future of Salem. And, you know, the experience we've had recently in just trying to find people to run for some of these offices. So, you know, for everybody at home and all that, this is not because council has any kind of, discontent with current administration. It's just looking forward and what's in the best interest of the city moving forward.
Right.
You know, and to that point, really, the council management form of government gives you the best of both worlds. It allows the elected representatives from that community to call the shots in terms of the direction that community takes, in terms of who they want to run that community. But it takes the guesswork out because, you know, you may have a very, very talented mayor who's very effective, but one election cycle could change that. And again, you lose some of that continuity and that institutional knowledge that passes along anytime an administration can change out. So, as I've said, I've been very fortunate to work with some very talented mayors, and I've enjoyed that time. But again, that council manager form of government allows for that wisdom and creativity on the policy end, and to be focused on by the city council. And you have someone who has trained, presumably their entire career, to implement public policy decisions and operate governments as effectively. And we always hear one of the monikers that we hear all the time, and I'm sure you all hear that as well, that we should run government more like a business. Well, that's essentially what we try to do in the council management form of government. Try to use our resources as wisely as possible.
Ms. Dickey?
My question is for the councilman. Did your community have a hard time getting 15 good individuals who would commit their time to being on the commission to start a charter government?
Well, I can tell you that it's a little bit before my time. It was 52 years ago. But fast forward to now, to the present, when we have a charter review commission every 10 years, which we do, council appoints members from the community. And those people make recommendations for charter changes, which you may know when you do have a charter, it's flexible. You can change it. It doesn't have to stay status quo. So in that respect, I really can't speak back to 1964, but, or 5, but I know that it was the charter community right from day one. So I think that was a direction. I remember some of the conversations I had with some of the council people that were on then was that they felt from day one that the city manager form of government was the way they wanted to go. So I don't think it was an issue getting people to run it. And it isn't an issue with us on the 2 charter commissions that I've helped put together since I've been on council, that people are very willing to go on there. You know, the way we divide it up on the 7 members, I think, you know, maybe the council president may have 2 choices and the rest have 1, or I think we might have had 8 or 9 members. I can't recall exactly how many we had. But then they bring those changes forward, it goes on the ballot. So they make, and the changes are made, so. But I just can't recall back exactly how that process worked, but I know, I never heard any discussion about at that time that they wanted a mayor form of government. And again, elected, we have council members and council president, and it has a lot of pull within the city, the political, and we are nonpartisan, by the way. We don't have any party affiliation as we run. We may belong to a member of a party, but the elections are nonpartisan. So when you're on the ballot, it doesn't say D or R or I or anything. So it's all nonpartisan. So
Is that by charter?
You know, I think it is. They're all nonpartisan. I think it is.
Mhm.
So, again, that makes it, very rarely when you're walking, when you're running, that you'll hear someone ask, and then when they do, you know, I'm a Democrat, but this is a nonpartisan election, so. And with your other question, I was gonna ask you, when you mentioned about union negotiations and that, as Ken said, with the continuity over time, you know, I get members of maybe the fire department to come, and they'll say, hey, you know, this is a problem, you know, we don't have enough members, staff, but they know what the next thing I'm gonna say is that, you know, we don't have anything to do with the administrative end of hiring and firing and negotiations. And they know that begrudgingly sometimes, they'd love to be able to say, hey, we endorsed you, why don't you do this? But it doesn't work that way with this form of government, so, and it works out well. So they, like you said, with the continuity, sometimes you get a new person in the union and they, you know, they wanna go be gung-ho and, hey, you gotta do this for us, but eventually they understand that that isn't the way it works, so.
I know we've had some challenges getting people to serve on boards and things. It's, you know, so everybody will say, oh, yeah, I want to do that, but then they don't show up.
Well, in our case, council appoints all the board members, committee and board members. And sometimes it's, you know, it's a struggle sometimes, you know, to make sure they understand the commitment. But oftentimes we do get a lot of good choices. A lot of people come out to apply for those positions. So.
Are there any closing remarks, or?
Let me just fast forward this. I think we've talked about most of these. I just wanted to, there was a final, here's some provisions, typical charter provisions. Mr. Zampedro touched on this momentarily. It has always been typical, and I don't think I've ever seen a charter where a city manager wasn't required to be a resident. There was certainly a time where most communities would require that their police and fire chief were also residents, and in some occasion, all employees. But again, the courts have pretty much ruled against us in that. So that may or may not be terribly relevant anymore. Some of the things, department head and agency appointments, who makes them, again, that's generally very, pretty much taken care of in the council manager form of government, because most of those appointments are made. You would want to make a decision on your law director. That is, I think we spoke about that a little bit when we had a conversation in the past. Some charters will have the city manager appoint the law director, others will have council. In my experience, I think it's probably better for council to do that. That might be a little contrary to my own best interest, but I think you need that independent legal entity, because he also serves as my law director as well, but he can take a very balanced and objective point of view. Temporary succession during absence or illness, that applies to elected officials, as well as you might want to consider that as two in terms of some of your more important commissions, whether that's your civil service commission or your planning commission, who succeeds and how they're removed, things like that. Non-interference clause, we touched on that. That's a very clear distinction between where that legislative authority stops and the administrative authority kicks in. Again, most charters are very specific on that. Council members are not, generally don't speak directly to employees or try to influence the employee behavior. Again, that becomes very easy. It's generally not a problem over time. Termination provisions, we talked a little bit about that as well. And then the selection process for your mayor and council leadership, and that generally follows probably what you're probably doing something similar to that now. And then hybrid forms. And keep in mind, I'll flip back to that. Hybrid forms, there are variants of the council mayor form of government. You've heard the term strong mayor and weak mayor, and there's things in between. There are, again, since you're adopting a charter, you would be adopting a charter under home rule. It isn't unusual for communities to transition sometimes, so you have an elected mayor, but maybe the administrative authority is vested in a city administrator that's given various levels of authority. He may have appointment authority, he may not have appointment authority. He may have appointment authority subject to approval by council. The mayor may have authority for all appointments, subject to a recommendation by the city administrator. So there are variations on that. I will tell you that I'm still a stronger advocate of the straight council management form of government. It's cleaner. It doesn't blur some of those lines. I have worked in that system before where there has been a weaker mayor form, and the politics do tend to still creep into the process. But those are available to you, and again, if you seek out some assistance and guidance, and you could probably get you can certainly identify a number of communities that have variations on that theme. And then this final slide up here just shows you, and I don't know if you can read that, but it shows you the breakout in the U.S. on the city manager form of government versus the council mayor. And as you can see, that most communities in that 20,000 or really 15,000 to about 250,000, the predominant form of government tends to be council mayor. When you get up into the largest cities and some of the smallest communities, they tends to go the other way. But that's it. So happy to answer any additional questions you might have. Gentlemen, any other comments?
Any other questions?
So on behalf of our city, the City of Mentor, the City of Painesville, as well as the Ohio City Managers Association, I thank you for the time here today. It was a pleasure being here, and I would offer that if you do go forward with your charter process, I can assure you that our association would be glad to assist you further, as well as the ICMA, who also have resources in the region that would also be available for your assistance.
Well, we thank you very much for making the trip and taking the time. And Cindy, I will mention that I was in Mentor when the charter was put together, but I was 5 at the time, and Captain Penny and Mr. Jingling made more, was where my attention was focused.
Well, we were talking about the 70s. I thought, we were pretty old in the 70s.
65. So anyhow, I mean, what I get out of this, one of the things that hit me early on was, we could start this process with a council vote. I mean, it could be by petition, of the citizens, or it could be by a council vote. So I think that we need, to digest some of the information and, probably meet again and discuss, what we want to do with the information that we've learned. So anyhow, with that, is there a motion to adjourn?
Jimmy,
Yes.
Just 1 second. Again, I'm looking at the time frames. So I hope if you're going to discuss this further, a decision has to be made before August 1st, if I did the math correctly.
Okay.
So you're looking at that, or you're looking at another year down the road. So
Right.
if it's something that we're going to start, let's start it
Mhm.
and do that within the next 90 days.
Okay. Well, I'll talk to the council president about putting together another committee of the whole meeting, in short order to move the discussion forward. Anything else? Motion to adjourn? Mr. Whitehill? Second, Ms. Dickey? Thank you.
Thank you all.